We think of Minecraft's snowy biomes as empty, quiet wastelands, but buried beneath the ice is the most tragic story in the game's history. A tale of a desperate faction who tried to outrun the apocalypse and ended up cursing themselves forever. The ice spikes weren't just a natural disaster. They were a tombstone. After the magical explosion flash froze the world, centuries of relentless blizzards buried what was left of the ancient builders' outposts. Today we call them trail ruins. Hidden deep beneath the taiga and snowy forests, these crumbling structures are the only remaining proof that they ever existed. By carefully brushing away the suspicious gravel, we uncover fragments of their final days. Shattered pottery, rusted armor trims, and the remnants of a desperate people. But as we dig deeper into the frozen earth, a terrifying realization sets in. There are no bones. Because those bodies are still wandering the surface today as the frozen undead. But their peaceful society didn't last. When the Great Flood threatened to drown the entire world, the northern builders tried to use ancient magic to freeze the water in its tracks. But the spell violently backfired. The snow golems had failed. With the undead breaking through their walls, the ancient builders attempted one final, desperate spell. They realized they couldn't fight the blizzard, so they tried to control it. Gathering massive amounts of packed ice and soul sand, they attempted a transmutation ritual to freeze the strays in their tracks. But the magic violently backfired. It didn't just freeze the undead, it flash froze the entire region. The earth ruptured, shooting massive, jagged ice spikes into the sky. At the epicenter of the blast, the magical pressure was so intense it created blue ice. A block so unnaturally cold, it permanently dropped the temperature of the world. The spell wiped out everything in its path, turning their last stronghold into an unlivable frozen wasteland. The magic didn't just freeze the flood, it plunged their world into an eternal, supernatural blizzard. Forced into hiding, their only goal was surviving the freezing temperatures and the monsters that came with the dark. Not all of the ancient builders tried to run across the ocean. The ones who stayed behind engineered a terrifying, invisible defense. They knew they couldn't fight the mutated strays in the blinding blizzards. So, they set up iron cauldrons to catch the heavy snowfall, creating deadly pockets of powder snow. They dug massive trenches around their bunkers and filled them with this artificial snow. To the naked eye, it looked like solid ground. The builders crafted specialized leather boots, allowing them to walk safely across the surface. But when the heavy undead strays tried to cross, they plunged directly into the freezing depths, trapped in the ice forever. But traps and leather armor could only hold back the horde for so long. The builders were vastly outnumbered. Realizing they couldn't win a physical war, they turned to the very snow that trapped them to build their own soldiers. When their invisible traps started failing, the ancient builders realized they needed an army. So they built one out of the very storm that trapped them. Desperate for soldiers to hold back the mutated strays, they turned to dark alchemy. Using carved pumpkins they had brought from the overworld, they infused the deadly powder snow with souls. They created the snow golems, an artificial, relentless militia designed to patrol the perimeters of their frozen bunkers and push the undead back into the blizzard. But the magic was flawed. The golems were loyal, but they were incredibly weak. Their snowballs did absolutely no damage to the frozen undead. They were nothing more than a distraction. The builders watched in horror as their artificial army was effortlessly slaughtered by the strays. They were finally out of options. It wasn't enough. The snow golems were slaughtered, and the undead breached the walls. In the chaos, the bunkers were locked down, leaving hundreds of builders trapped outside in the freezing storm. In Minecraft, the cold doesn't just kill you, it mutates you. When the Great Flood wiped out the surface, a faction of builders fled to the freezing north. They built underground bunkers to survive the apocalypse. But there wasn't enough room. The builders who were locked out in the blizzards slowly froze to death. But the zombie virus wouldn't let them rest. Their frozen corpses mutated into strays. They wander the ice, driven by one terrifying goal, dragging others down with them. That's why they shoot arrows of slowness. They want to trap you in the blizzard so you suffer the exact same fate. With their camp completely overrun by their own mutated friends, the last surviving builders had no home left. They fled to the coast, realizing their only chance of survival was to run across the very ocean they once tried to freeze. The ice faction was trapped, but they invented one desperate magic spell to escape the frozen dead. Surrounded by mutated strays in the freezing wastelands, the ancient builders created the Frostwalker enchantment. It was their only way to run across the deadly oceans and find a new home. But the magic was unstable. It didn't create solid glaciers. It only created temporary frosted ice. As they sprinted across the dark water, the ice violently cracked and melted right behind their feet. They couldn't turn back to save the others, and they couldn't stop moving. They were forced to run until they collapsed from exhaustion and sank into the freezing depths. The ice melted behind them, leaving them stranded in the deep ocean. The northern faction was gone, leaving behind only ruins, spikes, and the frozen dead. But what do you think? Did any of them make it across the sea, or did they all become the drowned? Let me know your theories in the comments and subscribe for the next Minecraft lore documentary.